you have an idea of how to get the environment set up.
Without a doubt.
Because a lot of this stuff, I mean, I do appreciate the explanation, but a lot of this stuff is stuff where you can I can look at JavaScript tutorials and look at syntax stuff.
Absolutely, and you can look at existing code and just let me try what they're doing there and see what I can figure out.
It seems like you got enough existing code there that's local that, I mean, that's generally how I code anyway, even if I wrote it, because I never remember how syntax works, how anything works until I write it out. So I think the fact that now we can just get in and mess around with this stuff is sufficient. At least for me, it's sufficient for now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to speak for anybody else.
I'd echo that. I'm going to have a lot of questions, but I work the same way. So
awesome.
Fine.
Right. Just so that you don't have to worry too much about spending too much time this evening going over stuff that, I mean, in the end, it's going to be better if we look at and kind of.
Well, I love this stuff. I'm not wasting any time. I could talk all night about some JavaScript jQuery. Love it.
That's pretty clear.
Let's see. I think it's kind of it. Like, you guys are all smart people, so you can see, like, set attribute I'm using a lot, and obviously there's two things I'm putting in: the name of the attribute and the value that I want. So that's going to be really handy and which we're going to use a lot. There's a certain syntax that I use a lot. I think it's called ternary. I don't know. My old professors hated it, but it's basically it works like this: condition, what you want it to do when it's true, and what you want it to do when it's false. And I love doing that because it's cleaner than doing if statements. So you see a lot like, does this have a patient content photo, and does it have a URL? If it does, let me have that. If it doesn't, put in that default no image. So I use that a lot, but it looks confusing, I guess, to some people.
That's definitely improper coding procedure by most Scholastic standards, but that doesn't actually matter because they're not grading our code anyway. So.
Is it improper, really?
That's the way I was taught, 10 years ago, but
I've been wondering that, like, my whole life. Like, they said don't use ternaries. I'm like, why not? They're awesome. I love it.
I think it really is a readability thing. I mean, it's definitely, as far as cleanliness is concerned, it's much more compact. But, I mean, if you're just reading through code, as much as it's much bulkier to have an if-else statement, as far as reading it is concerned, if you're not used to reading a whole bunch of operators in a line, then it's much clearer. So, no, I'm not trying to criticize or knock your coding style by any stretch of the imagination. I just am bringing up that's the way they teach it. So in HPCA, they do this all the time, and it makes the code a complete nightmare because the variables are not named very well, and there's no comments, and it's just a big hot mess, and they're nested, and as long as you're using it in ways where it's sensical, I mean, and not overdoing it, it seems to me like it's fine.
Okay. I'm going to dissect this particular example that I have right here. If I want to find an element on this page directly, just hover over it, inspect element, it should take you straight to it. So this is what I'm working with. And this is what I'm building at this point. So I created a new div. I'm locally calling it patient card. I gave it a class name, patient card. Check over here, patient card. And the only attribute I'm giving it that one is the patient ID, entry title, and you can see that right over here. Patient, blah, 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 blah. The next element I did was the image. So I created another element. It's an image. I gave it a class name, so I could put some fancy styling. And then I gave it a source attribute if it had one. I gave it a default over down here of no photo. So all these examples, they didn't have one. So you can see I have an image element here, class, source. And then I guess it's good practice for images to have an alternative, just in case, I don't know. I think it's for the blind people that can't, I don't know. I've always been told for an image you always have an alternative. Maybe it's for search engine optimizations. I digress. Moving on, I got this next element, patient demographic. You can see here's the class name. And then inner HTML will just let me throw whatever I want inside here. So I just straight up, quick and dirty, I put the patient's name, put a breakpoint or a break with the gender and the date of birth, and that's it. And then at the end, the patient card that I first created up here is I appended the children and I put the image in first, and then after that I put the patient demographics in. So that's the order that you see it in here. I took the patient card, I appended the image, and then I appended the card demographic, and then right at the end, this is the cool part right here. This is why I did it with JavaScript. So now this JavaScript object exists. I can append, or actually bind, data to it. So if you use this jQuery syntax, target your JavaScript object, patient card, and do .data, and you pass in something, check this out, guys. Hold on. This is about to blow your mind. I go down here. Remember that little tool that I showed you guys with using the $, whatever is highlighted? But that's going to show me that I have this patient card that's first. Data. I got everything that came in that JavaScript object right at this point. So I passed in entry, and entry is here. So now I can specifically use that element to get all the content that I had. So I didn't have to store this. You can't see it, but it's there. It's bounded to this element. Super cool. Super cool, guys. Come on.
You want us to clap, or just...
I don't know. And then the last thing I do is I targeted the scroll area and just appended the child. So that's just that is just this right here. I took this class. Okay, so the 3 ways you can target stuff with jQuery is you can do by just the element name. So there's so many divs. Let's see. We can find out how many divs we have. Div length. So there's 100 divs. And if you just did this, it'll give you every single div. You can target stuff by their class name. And that's always prefixed with a dot. So I can say dashboard header. And this will target just specifically the, if I can spell it right, dashboarder. Am I spelling it wrong?
You're missing the R. The R and the D were swapped before.
I always transfer it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, boom. Now I targeted that one class. But when you target something with a class, it's always going to come back as an array because, of course, you can have multiple things with the class. As you can see, I have lots of patient cards, so I'm going to just do that real quick and see how many patient cards I have on the screen. I have a bunch, and if I didn't want to count all those, I could do dot length. And I have 25, which is correct because that's how many counts I put in before. There's 25, so that's how many I got back. Awesome. Oh, and then the last, well, not the last, but another way that you can target an element is by their ID, and that's followed with a hash. And with IDs, they're not enforced, but they should be unique in the DOM. So I have a dashboard loading image. I did not do that, did I? No. Okay, yeah, I'm safe. I was like, did I just call all these with the same ID? Nah, I'm good. So yeah, you should only have one ID. If by chance there's 2 elements with the same ID, jQuery will only just grab that first one. So it might get confusing if we all start naming stuff similar and you're like, I don't know why this ID is not picking up. It's picking up something weird. Probably because we all decided the same name. Anyways, that's that. And then just to save space, since I'm doing something constantly, I just wrote this really quick function, update scroll container width. And all I did was I targeted the scroll thing with its class name, and I'm specifically editing its CSS width. So basically what I was doing is, like, every time I added a card, I was extending the length of this whole width so that, probably is a better way to do that, but that's just the way I was going out with it. And actually, I was using some cool, like I took the. Okay, I'm jumping off track. So that's parse data. Somebody give me a question so I know where to go next.
Well, if I may divert the conversation a little bit, thinking about the functionalities we want to have by the end of our project span here, what data are we actually going to pull? Because, like you said, you've got the cards and the width expands every time you add a new card. How many cards are we planning on pulling, and what's going to be dictating that? Are we going to pull the entire server? Because aren't they testing this on like 10,000 records or something that they're supposed to be pulling and testing and demonstrating, or at least 100?
For usability, what I'm picturing is maybe at most 10 cards here. And what I thought we would do is, when you first go to the doctor's office, you got to go to the front desk and check in.
Sure.
So I think this would be the beginning of getting a patient card on the dashboard. So once you check in a patient, they're going to show up on here. And then I guess once the doctor's done and they check out, that card's going to disappear. So that's how I think this is going to roll.
Okay. I mean, that seems reasonable to me. Does anyone have any thoughts about that? Objections? Feelings? I'll take the silence as a no. I mean, just so we have some direction to go, because like Chris said, we have we've only quote unquote only got 5 full weeks left. So having some direction on where we're trying to go, what we're trying to get to. I mean, I feel now, given the tutorial, and thank you very much for the tutorial, I feel fairly comfortable being able to kind of meander my way into where I feel I need to be so I can start doing stuff, or at least close enough that I'll be able to ask questions where the answer will help. Again, I don't want to speak for anybody else here, but I at least feel comfortable with that. My questions now are more of the type of how far are we trying to go? Because I imagine, on these cards having stuff like having the conditions and having the reason for visit on the card there. That way it's there.
Yeah.
And then checking the date that they, even if the doctor doesn't drop it, checking the date that they checked in and checking if it's today's date, and if it's not, then immediately dropping the card. Stuff like that. Seems like long term we would want to have that probably.
I was hoping that the cards would be like real fluid. Like it's gonna be changing every minute, which I was hoping I could talk to Chris about having WebSockets connected so that we could push and pull data directly without having the user refresh. That would be so awesome. Actually, I really, really hope we could do that. But I was hoping that just like a doctor's office, people come in, people go out, cards will come in, cards are going to go out. It's just going to be real fluid.
Right. Yeah, I mean, ideally, I think that's a good idea. I think that's definitely the direction we would want to head in as we move forward. The question really is kind of, and this is something that Will's brought up several weeks now, what are we defining as good enough, and when can we get there, and that what are we going to feel is sufficient for having the basic functionality completed, and then we can add all the quote-unquote frosting onto the cake after that, because it seems to me like it's kind of amorphous still a little bit, like we're throwing a bunch of stuff together and it's all progressing forward kind of, but I don't feel, at least for me, I don't see clear goals and set points that we want to get at. And I think that's kind of what Chris was getting at with what he was saying in the Google chat earlier, talking about our agile development and stuff. It doesn't feel like we have set waypoints of we want to get here and get this done. So It seems to me like the progress report is a really good waypoint to set. By next Thursday, what do we want to have actually working? So one question I do have is the data that you're currently pulling off of our Fire server, or is this off of that sample Fire server that we were using before?
This is our server.
Okay, so this is pulling the stuff off of our actual Fire server. Okay, so we pull a bunch of cards, and currently the information that's in those cards gets displayed, or we pull a bunch of patients, and the information from those patients gets displayed in these cards. That's what we currently have functional. Like we could show this to them today, kind of thing.
Yes.
Okay.
And since I have just a few elements right here on here, but all the data is actually bound to this card. I already have the functionality. When you click on that, it takes all that bounded data and applies them here. So I feel like that was a good step in the right direction for us.
Right. So if we're pulling, so maybe this is more applicable to the sphere that I'm kind of supposed to be taking on here. So stuff like, or even for example, like the vitals and the labs and stuff, is that data already being pulled from the Fire server? Is that already something that's already available that we can have? It just needs to be populated, or is that stuff we don't even pull yet?
Almost. I think we do have the Ajax call for conditions. I believe at the point that Chris was at, the first 100 patients that he had in our Fire server were created before conditions came in. So like it might be the last set of patients that actually have conditions. But if you do condition and grab this global glob whatever condition, you can just putting condition is just going to give you everything we have in our database, which we have 264, so he's got more. But since we didn't give it how many we wanted, the default is 50. So just like I did with the patient cards, you can just drill into here, see what it is, and just go from there. So this one is actually tied to a patient, whether this is our patient ID or whatever data that Chris pulled from. We're not sure yet, but once we start wiring this up with the front end, we'll easily be able to see which patients are actually,
So those IDs are unique then. We have something that's tying everything together.
Mm-hmm.
As far as information is concerned. Okay, so I guess a question that I have posing to everybody really is, this is kind of the group design decision. What do we want to display on these cards, the actual cards themselves, before you click on them? I was thinking something like conditions and then complaint, like reason for visit, or something that would be entered on check-in.
I think that's great.
With conditions, though, I think, yeah.
I'd go with just the complaint, personally.
Yeah. Complaint and maybe the vitals if the nurse is taking them already. I guess it depends who's going to see the screen and how much of it needs to stay private.
Oh, I was taking this from this is the doctor only seeing this screen thought.
I was thinking front desk, nurse, and doctor see this, but not.
Well, I don't know about the front desk then. Reason for visit, definitely front desk could be okay, but I mean vitals maybe not. I don't know. It depends on who's, how much sensitive.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I'm thinking of like from the doctor's perspective strictly, when they're looking at this interface and they see a card, the most significant identifiable information, I suppose. Because I mean, at that point, the doctor should have access to all the information. Definitely not if this is front desk or even nurse accessible, as that's a huge privacy concern and problem. I'm just trying to think. I'm not a doctor, obviously. But I'm trying to think, if I was a doctor and I have all these patients supposed to see today, if our goal is to reduce the amount of time it takes for the doctor to orient themselves for the appointment that they currently have coming up, what would be the most relevant information? And that's what we should put on this card, kind of thing.
I think the reason for visit, if it's a regular checkup or if they has an illness or a sprained ankle or
hurts.
Yeah, that sort of thing, and whatever the patient would be, I guess, comfortable presenting to, like when they call and making the appointment or to the receptionist, sort of thing.
Yeah, I felt like the reason for a visit was an obvious on this card. I just haven't done that because I thought maybe it would be an easy task to assign someone. I also think it'd be kind of good to have the conditions that the patient already has, since we need to have an example of us using that part of our Fire server. But that might also be meaningful to a doctor who can quickly.
But should that be on the detail page, the one that you bring up?
Yeah, it could be a summary of their conditions. Maybe we can just do a quick glimpse of, maybe it doesn't even have to be a whole list, but just You know,
But again, it depends who's going to see that. I don't know that I want the receptionist to see it. Well, I guess it depends on what, I'm never been in worked in a doctor's office, so I don't know how much would a receptionist type person actually see of the patient's records.
we definitely can get to a point where we have role-based views. I think everybody should have the same shell, just because it's easily acceptable if everybody understands the same structure. I think it could be beneficial for a front desk to maybe just at least see how many active patients are checked in, so that, when they get more people coming in, they're like, how long's the wait? Oh, well, we got about 25 people, from this, they can see this screen. We'll hide the stuff that we don't want front desk can see, but I'm assuming since the nurse and the doctor are passing files between each other, that they can see the vitals, the nurse can see the vitals that they're taking, and then
You can safely assume. So in a doctor's office environment, your front end staff, everybody, they're allowed to see the data, right? So they're not violating any HIPAA laws by having the receptionist go through a patient record and collect data for the doctor, because that's what they're doing today, and that's what this app is trying to automate and do better for them. So you don't have to worry about privacy there. I just think you want to focus on what's the convenience and what's the quickest for them. So I'll just comment on the one piece of feedback we got last week, the only piece so far, and remind that the point was they don't want to see everything all at once. They don't want a giant data chart,
right,
because it's not useful. So.
Right, I'm just trying to think so for example, if you've got all these patients, right, and then if they have conditions, and if you have your condition and your complaint just in the summarized form or whatever, then I think that can help skip a lot of stuff that isn't automatic. Like, for example, if someone has some sort of chronic stomach condition and their complaint is, I'm having stomach pains, I feel like that can at least refresh memory for a doctor faster than if it's just amorphous. This person's having stomach pains. Well, what could that possibly be? Well, I already know they have an ulcer, so this is likely going to be this, and it can help them refresh on the file. Because I figure, again, I'm not a doctor, but I figure the most relevant information is going to be what helps bring that patient's information to the doctor's memory the quickest.
Yeah, but should it be on this patient card screen versus the drill down to the patient?
I think so.
I think it's just a convenience thing, having that there before you have to tap it. That way you don't say, well, who is this person? Oh, who's this person? Who is this person? You can say, oh, this name looks familiar. What do they have again? Oh, yeah, they have this set of conditions. That, to me, seems like it would be something that's convenient and encapsulates the information. That way you don't have the big group of information. That seems like one of the most relevant details, at least in my feeling. That I would want to know if I was a doctor, what are the conditions this person already has that I already know as soon as possible. But I could be wrong about that.
Well, what about this? What about instead of, just kind of walls of information, we've already started the idea of the workflow path, the nurse check-in, stuff like that, and, the nurse taking the vital signs. Maybe we should kind of break it up in as far as what the doctor is doing. The doctor preliminary, he has a screen that shows everything that's happening for that visit, and then maybe the next screen is the get to know your patient screen that says, hey, this is the last couple things that happened to him, so you can follow up on it. That it's basically the flow path, that we just continue down the flow path that we were already starting to discuss. What about that? No.
No.
I mean, that seems like a good course of action. Determining what are they going to actually want. I think that's a question we might have to ask the customer, as it were, of what are the stuff. Maybe present some sort of idea like here's what we feel is useful information you would want right away. Is this actually useful information, or is there information you'd rather have on the screen, kind of thing?
So I guess my comment on that, so I'm totally with you there, Levin, but my question becomes, what happens when they've got just a ton of historical conditions? like too much to fit on the card.
Right.
So that's my only concern with that approach.
All right, let's see. So these are, let's see, let's get all of them.
Every
This person should be dead.
I mean, I guess at one point, I mean, we could even just have an ellipsis or something and just say, have the list, and if it gets too long for the displayable space, just have a ... there, because it really is just supposed to be a summary. And then once you actually drill down into it, that's when you'll see the big list of everything. You know, that's when you have all the information. So, because if someone has like 100 conditions and the doctor looks at the name, sees the face, sees that they have 100 conditions, they're going to know who it is at that point. You know, I would think, if they're that big of a patient. But I mean, if it's, you know, for example, in Utah, there's huge mental illness everywhere. I'm not just saying that because people in Utah are crazy, but like there really is a very big prescription drug mental illness correlation in Utah. There are tons of people that just go to the doctor and their conditions are just, you know, depression or anxiety or this, you know. And so if you have this, you have their picture, you have their name, you have, I'm coming in to get a prescription refilled, and then you have the condition is depression, then the doctor looks at that and says, okay, I remember this person, you know, has such. It's giving all of the identifiable information so they can bring them back. And then when they drill in, they already know what they need to look for and what they want, I guess. Does that make any sense? That's kind of my train of thought, personally. I'm not sure if that's like way off base, because again, I'm a doctor, but that's kind of what I was thinking, is having something that'll identify them as much as possible. So that kind of negates the problem of, well, what if they have 1,000 conditions? If they're that guy, because I'm sure every practice has several of that guy that just has every single thing under the sun, or at least thinks they do, then they'll see that there's a list that's cut off and be like, okay, yes, I remember this person. And then the information will be available behind the card, kind of thing. Do we have any feelings about that?
So I like it, and here's my other thought on that piece. And I'm sorry, I'm playing devil's advocate at this point.
That's your job. That's what you're supposed
to do. Hey, before you go into that, it sounds like we're done with the mic spiel. Is it okay to stop recording?
That seems. Okay. I think that seems reasonable.
Sounds good.
So, are we worried at all about what the patient card will look like if they're coming in with a tummy ache, but they're